Yesterday, I said the European Alternative Peace Plan was doomed to fail because Trump had no incentive to pretend there was any chance of it succeeding, and so drawing it out. Instead, it would all unravel quickly from here. While I was saying that, the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, was telling the UK Parliament that there was no imminent danger of the US pulling its support of Ukraine.
I haven't seen reports of the US withdrawing support for Ukraine, and as I understand, that is not their position.
Look, I would happily have been wrong on this occasion, but as we know, the quick unravelling has continued apace. Specifically, Trump has pulled military aid to Ukraine, all military aid, including equipment that was agreed by the Biden administration that was literally crossing the Atlantic but hadn't yet reached its destination. It's described as a temporary pause, but that is kind of propaganda positioning. It's temporary so long as Ukraine agrees to surrender to whatever terms get agreed between Trump and Putin in the deal they strike between them. The new Trump English dictionary, soon to be published I would expect, redefines peace as merely the absence of fighting. Various figures, from Ronald Reagan to Martin Luther King, may have been quoted as saying the opposite, but they're just so yesterday, apparently. Keir Starmer remains somewhat in denial after the announcement. His team told the press this morning that he would not be derailed by announcements and that he was laser focused on getting peace. And since his one trick is to be the gopher between Ukraine and Trump, this meant that, at the point of shooting this video anyway, he was refusing to take a public view on America's halting of arms shipments. His official spokesman even voiced the faintly pathetic words, "Decisions for the United States are a matter for the United States." Arguably, selling Ukraine to Putin is not just a matter for the United States, but they'll get there sooner or later. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin, after the effects of the champagne of the night before had died away, has begun to deliver value back to Trump in terms of their burgeoning partnership. So it was reported today that Putin has agreed to help Trump negotiate with Iran over its nuclear program and its support for various anti-US proxies such as Hezbollah. According to The Telegraph, Iran has not denied the claim, saying it was natural for other countries to offer their help. This will be the first of several quid pro quos, I'm guessing. Some of those will be dependent on Trump's ability to deliver Ukraine to Russia in a way that meets the majority of Putin's goals. This is why we're seeing, and will continue to see, the pressure ramping up. Basically, the plan very much seems to be that Trump and Putin agree the shape of a deal, present it to Ukraine and Europe on a take-it-or-leave-it basis. The leave-it clause will be along the time-honoured Hollywood gangster movie principles of an offer you can't refuse. Hence, the US will cut off aid, the US will push out maximal anti-Zelensky propaganda to try to turn his own people against him, they will define peace as merely the absence of fighting and say that Ukraine is the barrier to peace. You and I might point out, peace is being redefined to mean not resisting an invasion of your own country, but that's not how half of Americans are currently reading all of that. Some figures who are not current political leaders, and therefore have complete freedom to say what most people committed to that old rules-based order of thinking, have been challenging the American contortion of facts. For instance, Lech Wałęsa, the Polish Labour leader who stood against the USSR control of his country and was jailed for his pains. He joined with other Polish political prisoners to release an open letter to President Trump, and he didn't mince its words. "We watched the report of your conversation with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, with fear and distaste. We consider your expectations to show respect and gratitude for the material help provided by the United States to Ukraine insulting. Gratitude is due to the heroic Ukrainian soldiers who shed their blood in defence of the values of a free world. They have been dying on the front line for more than 11 years in the name of these values and independence of their homeland, which was attacked by Putin's Russia. They went on to describe the shock of recognition they felt watching the Oval Office meltdown. Our panic was also caused by the fact that the atmosphere in the Oval Office during this conversation reminded us of one we remember well from security service interrogations and from the debate rooms in communist courts. Prosecutors and judges at the behest of the all-powerful communist political police also explained to us that they hold all the cards and we held none. They demanded us to stop our business, arguing that thousands of innocent people suffer because of us. They deprived us of our freedoms and civil rights because we refused to cooperate with the government and our gratitude. We are shocked that Mr. President Volodymyr Zelensky was treated in the same way. And they finished with a pointed reference to the Budapest Memorandum. We are calling for the United States to withdraw from the guarantees it made with Great Britain in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, which recorded a direct obligation to defend the intact borders of Ukraine in exchange for it giving up its nuclear weapons resources. These guarantees are unconditional. There is no word about treating such aid as an economic exchange. Now, this is a powerful case being made by those who believe in justice and honour in international dealings, when the Cold War between the West and the Soviet Union was one of principle. Free democracies on the one side, autocratic communism on the other. Unfortunately, as we've said since the very first announcement on grabbing Greenland, this is not the world that Trump recognises or wants to act within. This is the world where the major powers do what they want and the smaller countries in their orbit suffer what they must. There is no ideology in this modern version. There is only the expression of power and the establishing of spheres of interest. The US and Russia, which used to be divided on principle, have now come together on the founding tenets of kleptocracy. Europe has little choice but to look nervously over its shoulders, both shoulders, while it absorbs its new situation and starts to behave like an entity that has some chance of pulling its weight in this new world. Ursula von der Leyen said the EU would be looking to bolster Europe's defence industry. Unspoken truth, because we can't rely on American weapons ever again, and would look to raise €800 billion to provide military support to Ukraine. Now, this makes perfect sense, and it provides a problem for Trump. Can Europe simply take over from the US and support Ukraine for an ongoing longer war? No, it can't. But can it keep Ukraine on its feet and fighting for longer than Trump and Putin want? Absolutely yes. 6 months, maybe a year, degraded because of the absence of American air capabilities, but strong enough. I would expect, therefore, that as Trump and Putin advance their discussions, America will specifically begin to apply serious pressure on Europe to pull its support for Ukraine. Various forms that could take. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the first signs of how that will go relatively soon, although the pressure will really crank up once there is a one-sided peace deal that Ukraine needs to be bullied into. I remind you of what, I think it was Marco Rubio who said that, of course, at some point, the Europeans would have to come to the negotiating table. After all, he said, they currently have sanctions against Russia. The implication was that Europe would be called to the table when it was time, and only when it was time, to instruct them to drop those sanctions. The assertion of Europe that this is a war happening on European soil and they are directly involved, clearly not one that's taken remotely seriously in the White House, at least on the basis of that statement. So yes, while Europe has realised it needs to strengthen its position, it is not going to be left alone to just do that in a neutral environment. Meanwhile, expect to see all sorts of knock-on effects. For example, the Paris-based satellite company Eutelsat said today that it's in talks with European governments about providing additional satellite connectivity in Ukraine. The aim being to provide an alternative to Elon Musk's Starlink system that then wouldn't just be able to be pulled from service as Trump aims to pile on the pressure. Decoupling from the United States' dominance of goods and services is beginning. It's going to take a long time, a decade at least. But actions have consequences, and those consequences are now going to start playing out over an accelerated timescale. And of course, not just in Europe. Today, the 25% tariffs was slapped onto Canada, as long threatened by Trump. Canadians have been reorientating themselves away from a lot of American imports over the last month, just as a result of the fury and upset about being so randomly attacked by the country that was supposed to be its closest ally. It's another area where I imagine the consequences are going to play out over time, and yes, ultimately will not be to America's liking. I mean, heck, I've seen MAGA tweeters already foaming at the mouth because Canadians have been booing the US national anthem at sports events. The self-same people who cheered for Trump actions against Canada and then don't seem to like the consequences. Because so long as you can blame the other guy, then I suppose you can stay on your perch. Expect in a few years to see a raft of puzzled Americans posting questions online like, why does the rest of the world hate us? Mainstream media are now catching onto the drift of all this. The Wall Street Journal, for instance, just published an editorial saying, if the president really has decided that his worldview is now that the US, Russia and China should divide the world up between them, well, it would be good if he could be open about that with the American people. Because in spite of all the MAGA folk saying Americans voted for this, well, this part they really didn't. The Wall Street Journal thought that the time to do this would be in Trump's address to Congress, taking place later today. Trump has recently posted that the address would be dynamite and he would tell it like it is. On past history, that could mean just about anything. I mean, it could mean he's planning to launch a meme coin for all we know. No doubt he will have plenty of the usual messages, the boasting of everything that he's done and all of that. But yes, it would be the moment to explain how he sees America's place in the world. Because we can see what's happening in action. It would be interesting to know if he's capable or willing to articulate the vision behind the actions in words that actually fit the actions. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath, but yeah, really, it should be the moment when he does.